My guest on the Europe Conversation this week is Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly. She says Europe and Canada must retaliate against Trump's tariffs, and Canada will lead the way. Well, Mélanie Joly, Foreign Minister of Canada, thank you very much for joining us on the Europe Conversation.
Thank you, Shana. It's a pleasure to be with you.
We're here at the NATO Foreign Ministers Summit, and I want to ask you, first of all, because it's also Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State's first NATO summit. What was your engagement like with him today?
Well, I've had many conversations in the past with the Secretary of State, with Marco Rubio. Today was much more informal because we haven't had the chance to sit down together alone. But we've been targeted, and now I've said that many times to many of my colleagues. We were the canary in the coal mine, and now they've just experienced it. So we are under 3 executive orders coming from the White House, one on our entire economy of 25% tariffs, which we were able to partly pause, but for 40% of all our goods being sent to the U.S., there's still 25% tariffs. We also have 25% on our steel and aluminum going to the U.S., and we also have 25% tariffs against our auto sector. And we think that there will be other sectors. So based on that, we've led the charge because we didn't launch this trade war, and we know that there are no winners in a trade war, but we came up with $60 billion worth of counter tariffs on American goods in Canada. And also the Prime Minister Carney, just announced that we will also retaliate 25% tariffs against auto and auto parts that are not covered by the trade deal we have with the U.S. So basically American cars and American parts coming to Canada but are not compliant.
What is the reaction from the White House to that? Because Donald Trump said on so-called Liberation Day that any country that tries to retaliate, that he will increase further the tariffs.
We're defending ourselves. We never started this trade war. And it is clear to us, knowing so well the American people, that the American people don't agree with the actions coming out of the White House. And, Shauna, the only way for President Trump to back off on his trade war is for American people themselves to say it's enough. And they are the ones that can create the political pressure within their own system to make sure that that's the case. And that's exactly why we launched an advertising campaign in 12 Republican states, red states, which clearly states what tariffs are, which it is, tariffs are clearly a tax on hardworking Americans. Tariffs are also a tax at the gas pump. Tariffs are also a tax on their grocery bill. So we've made it clear to the American public, and we're seeing that there is a lot of frustration within American society towards what's happening now. Now, I think we have to retaliate. We need to defend ourselves. And so not only are we leading the charge, we're the country at this point that has imposed counter tariffs the most against U.S. goods. We're working with the EU. I had just a conversation with the EU Trade Commissioner, Sefcovic. We're working also with Asian partners, and we'll continue to put maximum pressure.
If the EU, Canada, the strongest allies, I suppose, of the United States, but also trading partners, all come together and apply tariffs, then the US will have no choice but to reverse its path.
Well, at one point, American people will see that inflation is rising and people are losing their jobs. And it will hit their wallet and they'll be mad. And I understand them. And at the same time, they'll know that the reason for that is because the president has decided to launch a trade war against many countries, including particularly Canada in our case, and, certain other allies, including, for example, the EU. And I think that American people are smart people, are reasonable people, are people that hate taxes. As, pretty much all citizens on earth hate taxes. And so I'm confident that our approach will work. The Senate is also getting much more involved into this discussion. So we're following closely also what the Senate is doing in Congress in the U.S. But there's no country on earth that understands the most the U.S. than Canada. And so we can share that knowledge with our friends and allies around the world, including in Europe. And meanwhile, we know we're too dependent on their economy. And we're the most non-European country on earth. And our goal is to also become closer to the Europeans.
Part of the relationship with the US and Canada, the ambition of Donald Trump is a little bit different than just tariffs, that he's saying that he would like to subsume or take or have Canada as the 51st state.
I think when President Trump speaks, we listen and we take him to his word. I think that's really important. He's the most powerful person on earth, and therefore he has many tools in his toolbox. At the same time, this impact of the threat of sovereignty against Canada has rallied people in Canada around our flag. People are clearly saying that will never happen. We will never be the United States. We can be your best friends, best neighbor, best allies, but forget it, we'll never be your 51st state.
When you think about the bellicose language about Canada and also Greenland, which is the semi-autonomous part of Denmark, what do you feel about his ambitions, though, as a president of the United States that is obviously much more muscular?
Well, I think that, we're at NATO here. One of the key articles at the core of the NATO agreement is to respect the sovereignty of all countries. It is also part of the UN Charter, as we all know. So we expect that the sovereignty of Canada and the sovereignty of Denmark is respected, period. And now, if we need to increase Arctic security amongst NATO, if we need to do more in the Arctic to counter the Chinese and Russian cooperation on the military front, no problem, let's do that. I know that the Trump administration is concerned about the Arctic, and I share their concerns. And I know we can work on making sure that we address these concerns, but it is not to the detriment of our sovereignty or the sovereignty of our other allies.
And did Marco Rubio accept that?
Well, with me, when I speak with the Secretary of State, I don't give him an inch of possibility to challenge our sovereignty, period. It is not up to discussion. This is not something that we need to talk about. I'm Canada, you're the US, we're two sovereign nations, and we have a diplomatic conversation. That's it.
I want to ask you about the coalition of the willing when it comes to Ukraine. Obviously, certain countries, the UK and France, have said that they're willing to put troops in Ukraine, but there needs to be a backstop, a support from the United States. Do you think that's forthcoming?
Well, I can't talk for the US. It's up to them to answer your questions. But what I can tell you is Canada is willing to participate in that coalition.
So you would put troops on the ground in Ukraine?
Well, of course, we're in an election right now. We need to make sure that if that's the case, that we get the support from Canadians beforehand. But we've been doing a lot of training for Ukrainian troops. Before the war was launched, Canada had already trained 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers, and we have an expertise in training, and we're training Ukrainians in country, outside of country as well. And we've been participating in all these very high-level meetings in London and also in Paris, because we believe, like all Europeans, believe that if we don't support Ukraine, we are next to a very dangerous Russia, which is the case for Europeans, which is the case for us in the Arctic. And President Putin has no red lines. And if we're not able to get to a good deal in Ukraine, well, we will show not only President Putin that he can continue and therefore attack eventually NATO and therefore ourselves, but at the same time, being an Indo-Pacific country, we know very well that China is following very, very closely and could use this opportunity of lack of unity to ultimately go ahead in Taiwan.
Just final question. We saw the failure of the ceasefire in Gaza. We've seen hostages still there, controlled by Hamas, and some of the most savage scenes of children losing their lives from Israeli bombs. What is Canada calling for Israel and America to do?
Well, I think in the end, what we're seeing right now is just a lack of humanity. And we need to make sure that Israel and Hamas or Qatar are going back through the negotiation table. We always knew that the second phase of, or as the second phase of the ceasefire was coming, it would be much more difficult. But we need to make sure that that's the case, that there is ultimately hostages that are sent back in an honorable way also. And we need to make sure that the violence stops and that civilians are protected. We know that there won't, and Canada really profoundly believes that there will be no peace and security in the Middle East if there's not a two-state solution.
Does Canada support the International Criminal Court?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we saw Hungary leaving there today.
Well, Canada founded, along with some other members, the International Criminal Court. We always thought that when we looked at the international system, what was lacking was the accountability of countries towards international law, and that's why we believe in it.
Is it disappointing that one of your allies, Hungary, has decided to exit?
Well, I think that it is indeed a problem when we don't see the strength of having accountability in a world where we know that it is ultimately a world that is more dangerous.
Okay, well, Mélanie Joly, Foreign Affairs Minister of Canada, thank you very much for joining us on the Europe Conversation.
Thank you so much.